Chapter 6: The Night When Raphael Danced. Told by my uncle. It was a Sunday, said my uncle. The soldier arrived in his boat in the early afternoon when everything was quiet. He lowered his anchor a few meters from the shore as usual and walked up the sand to the houses. He never pulled his boat up onto the beach. It was a heavy boat, and he didn't want to break the engine. He always left it in about 1 meter of water. That day, he came first to the cafe. He sat and talked with me and some of the men. We all sat outside the cafe and listened to his stories. Then, later in the afternoon, he went to Rodrigo's shop and bought a few things. He had a big can of paraffin in the boat for Rodrigo's new lamp. I saw him give it to him. The soldier and Rodrigo sat and talked and drank coffee outside the shop for about an hour. When it got dark, he went with Rodrigo into the house behind the shop. I could see the bright light from the lamp through the window. Then the soldier had a meal with Rodrigo. After the meal, he came back to the cafe and sat with me and some of the fishermen. It was very dark and we sat inside. The soldier seemed very happy. He told us a lot of funny stories about his life as a soldier. Then, at about 9 o'clock, Raphael came into the cafe. We were surprised to see him because Raphael didn't spend a lot of time in the cafe. And he never came into the cafe when the soldier was there. That night, he was wearing his best clothes. Usually, he wore his old clothes, even in the cafe. He was wearing his best shirt and trousers. Trousers are pants. His face and hands were very clean, and his hair was still wet and shiny from washing. I asked myself, is he trying to show the soldier that he is not just a poor fisherman? The soldier knew Raphael. He knew that he wanted to marry Anita. Everyone in the village talked about it. Raphael knew that the soldier was also interested in her. Everyone in the village talked about that too. But nobody knew the secret game that the soldier was playing. Raphael and the soldier didn't speak. The cafe was quiet. Nobody spoke. Suddenly, the soldier took a cassette from his pocket. "Let's have some music," he said, giving me the cassette. I took it and put it into the player. I remember it was a love song. It was sung by a girl with a soft and beautiful voice. We all sat and listened to it. Raphael smiled and listened too. When the cassette ended, I put another cassette in the player, but the soldier stood up. "It's getting late," he said. "I must go." He went into the dark night. It was about 10 o'clock, I think, his usual time. A few minutes later, we heard the noise when he started the engine of his boat. Then the sound of the engine went along the coast. Soon everything was quiet again. We could only hear the sea and the music. The girl on the cassette was singing another love song. It was a sad song, slow but strong. The fisherman and I sat quietly and listened. Suddenly, Raphael stood up in the corner of the cafe and began very slowly to dance. Alone in the shadows, his eyes closed. He moved to the music. He danced, his head back, eyes closed, a strange half smile on his face. We all watched him in surprise. Do you remember surprise is a vocabulary word? Surprise is like shocked, right? Sorpresa. Choqueado. After a few minutes, we laughed and went on talking. But Raphael went on dancing alone for the rest of the evening. Every time the music stopped, he looked at me with big dark eyes and said, "Again." And I put another cassette in the machine. Then Raphael smiled, closed his eyes, and continued dancing. At midnight, remember midnight means in the middle of the night at 12 o'clock, medianoche. At midnight, all the other men went off to bed. Raphael was still there, still dancing. I watched the poor boy until the song ended. Then I switched off the machine. Switched off means to turn off, like apagar. I said goodnight to him and sent him home to bed. Then the next morning, before daylight means when the sun comes up and you have some light of the day. Then the next morning, before daylight, we heard shouting and crying from Rodrigo's house. The news went around the village like fire. Anita wasn't there. Rodrigo sent all his family and friends out to look for her. They looked along every road, big and small. They looked in the fields, along the beach, in the rocks, everywhere. Later, Raphael came out of his house with his mother. Everywhere. Later, Raphael came out of his house with his mother. I told them about Anita, and they were very surprised. They were shocked, right? We all were. Raphael went to his boat immediately. He planned to sail along the coast and look for her. He sailed away to the west. I watched him until I couldn't see him. He sailed around the rocks at the end of the village. He was looking at the land as he went. The next time I saw him, he was mad. Everybody in the village was out looking for Anita that morning, but nobody found her. Then Santiago couldn't find his old donkey. He came to Rodrigo's shop. He was shouting that Anita took it. Rodrigo was very angry. He wanted to hit Santiago and knock him down. I thought he wanted to kill the old man. Some friends of Santiago took him away quickly. After that, he said nothing more about the donkey. Then, early in the afternoon, some of the fishermen found Raphael. He was about a kilometer west of the village, in a quiet place near the high rocks. His boat wasn't far from the shore, and Raphael was laying in the bottom of it. He was wet and dirty. He was looking up at the sky and laughing, and he was completely mad. Remember that mad means angry sometimes, but in this book, mad means crazy. So when Raphael went to look for Anita and he couldn't find her, he started to go a little bit crazy. They brought him and the boat back to the village. His mother and I washed him and gave him some water. We put him to bed, but he lay and made noises all night. He screamed and fought. He was like a mad animal. The next day, he went out of the house and sat by his boat. He looked at the sea all day and said nothing. We waited day after day. We gave him food and drink. We washed him when we could, but he was like a small child. We waited for him to get better, but he never did. And you never found out what made him mad? I asked my uncle. He never speaks. So Raphael doesn't talk. He doesn't tell anybody what happened. Only about the ring. You know everything that I know now, he said. When we were washing the poor boy, we found the gold ring on a fishing line around his neck. When we tried to take it off, he screamed. So we left it there. All these years later, he still wears it around his neck. He gave 6 months of his life to buy that ring, his present for Anita, which she never had.